Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and I'm so glad to talk to you today about Dungeons and Dragons and Book of Many Things. I am getting more and more excited by the day about Book of Many Things. It is such an incredible book, such an incredible D&D canon hardback, and the ramifications of what it means for us to have BOMT, Book of Many Things, BOMT, BOMT. When I say BOMT, I mean Book of Many Things. Is incredible. Let's talk about chapter 1 of Book of Many Things, the Fool chapter. Chapter 1, Fool card. Okay? So what is chapter 1, the Fool card, talking about? Well, it's talking about the history of Dungeons and Dragons. That's pretty incredible. That's pretty astounding. The history of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So what does that mean, right? Well, you are looking at the history of Dungeons and Dragons, and it is truly incredible. And it's really astounding. And I just kind of want to walk this through. So it's talking about the history of Dungeons and Dragons, specifically the history of the deck of many things through the history of Dungeons and Dragons, and frankly through every edition of Dungeons and Dragons, right? And one of the things that's really fascinating is this is Hasbro D&D talking about all of Dungeons and Dragons, right? And that's interesting because the majority of Dungeons and Dragons has happened under Hasbro D&D, right? But there was a very significant period of time that happened outside of Hasbro D&D. D&D wasn't always Hasbro. It is today. The best D&D is Hasbro D&D, but D&D was not always Hasbro, right? And Hasbro was not always D&D, but it is now. Okay, so basically, what's really fascinating about BOMT Chapter 1, Fool, is it's talking about the deck of many things through the entirety of Dungeons and Dragons. So first of all, it came out in 1975, the deck of many things. That's just 1 year after Dungeons and Dragons was birthed itself. Right? So the deck of many things is virtually the same age as Dungeons and Dragons, virtually, and it is a magic item that came from the gate of Dungeons and Dragons, like from the very beginning, right? But what's really interesting is they actually list out, they say like, hey, deck of many things was in Dungeons and Dragons, was in Dragon Magazine, and it actually talks about Dragon Magazine, which is really fascinating because, again, this is Hasbro talking about its own history of Dungeons and Dragons, talking about history of Dungeons and Dragons, but it's not their history. They didn't create Dragon Magazine. And then the other thing is also talking about canon, right? I am telling you, nothing on this planet is more complicated than D&D canon. Understanding D&D canon would take, I think it would take a university. I'm predicting now, there will be an entire university that does nothing but study Dungeons and Dragons at some point. Probably about 10, 20 years from now, right? I definitely think it's coming, right? So basically, and by the way, there's so many scholars that do nothing but that study Dungeons and Dragons that I couldn't even list them all, and you couldn't either. There's literally like 50 or 100 of them. There are literally scholars that do nothing but study Dungeons and Dragons, and the history is just 5 decades old, right? Like Ben Riggs, hey, you're like, does that dude do anything else? I don't think so, right? Like, yeah, and so yeah, let's keep it targeted here. Red 5 on target. Okay, so basically, you have this situation where Hasbro D&D is talking about Dungeons and Dragons history, but what's really interesting is if you read BOMT Chapter 1 Fool, it says Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition. Why is that? Why is 1st edition and 2nd edition not specifically listed, right? Well, a lot of reasons. I think one of those reasons very clearly is that there is a huge amount of debate on what Dungeons & Dragons First Edition is and what Dungeons & Dragons Second Edition is. Now, I'm going to clarify that. And I'll tell you right now, I think the reason it's not listed in why it says, Deck of Many Things, Third Edition. It says Third Edition. Here's what happened with Deck of Many Things there. Fourth Edition. Here's what happened with Deck of Many Things there. Fifth Edition. Here's what happened. In Third, Fourth, and Fifth Edition are all distinct, heading 1 headers, right? But Advanced Dungeons & Dragons spans across First and Second Edition, right? But there is a D&D 1E. There is a D&D 2E, right? D&D 1E is everything that happened from 1974, and this is my humble opinion, and this is how I define D&D 1E and D&D 2E. And I'll tell you right now, you can come at me in the comments, because frankly, I got you beat. I am a subject matter expert when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons. Period. End of sentence. I got 5,000 videos to back that statement up. What you got, fool? Let's see it. Like, okay. All right. So, yeah, and I'm very confident with my information about Dungeons & Dragons, because if I say anything wrong, it takes about 5 seconds for somebody to correct me in the comments, and I don't forget my comments. Like, I don't forget my comments or my commenters. I'm thankful for them, or I'm happy if they're going to the 7th circle, which some of them are. I guarantee you that. Or like not a lot, but a few. And I've had some journeys, so let me tell you. I will not tell you. I'm not gonna. Let me stay focused. Red 5 on target. Here we go. All right. So basically, D&D 1E is 1974 to 1989. D&D 1989 to 1999 is D&D 2E. And then 3E starts in 1999 under Hasbro, okay? And Hasbro owned D&D under 2nd edition for about a New York 2nd, and then it took it to 3, right? But I really think it's fascinating that Hasbro cannot even talk about 1st and 2nd edition, right? They can't say the words 1st edition. They can't say the words 2nd edition, because there's so much controversy, so much debate, right? And I think there might even be legal issues, right? Like, I know for a fact there were legal issues back in the day, and some of those might persist, right? So they might need to be careful. And this is the point, right? You're like, Scott, what could be dangerous? There is danger at every turn with Dungeons & Dragons, because it's not a game. like it never was a game, right? Like, in my humble opinion. Right? This is like, nobody worries about what's the controversy with Monopoly First Edition. Well, please, come on. Ain't nobody like it. It's not a game. It has never been a game, right? And things happen on it that don't happen anywhere else. BOMT, Chapter 1, Fool. Okay? Very, very fascinating. And I really, and it is a look at Dungeons & Dragons Dungeons & Dragons history. And specifically, it is a very clear view of how Hasbro actually views the editions, right? And I think what they're saying is that Advanced Dungeons & Dragons call it D&D 1E and 2E, and then 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 5th edition. And to be clear, they can speak with perfect clarity on 3rd, 4th, and 5th, because Hasbro owned them all, right? Whereas if they say this is D&D 1E, this is D&D 2E, they didn't own it during that period, right? They did actually own it for a slim second while 2E was up. So they have claim to determine the length of 2E, but I don't know if they have claim to determine the beginning of it. Very fascinating. I am so excited. I'm just so excited about BOMT. It is an incredible book, and really, Chapter 1 is really a brilliant insider look at how Hasbro looks at the editions through the ages, right? And if you don't own BOMT, man, get that thing. It is an incredible book. Well, it's more than a book. It's more than a book. It's not just a book. It's a book and a magic item. Every single word I just said is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.